This is Monocle on Fashion, a show on Monocle Radio offering exclusive insights and global perspectives on the fashion industry. I'm Natalie Theodosi, your host and Monocle's fashion director. For this episode, I speak to Blake Abbie, actor, singer, and editor-in-chief of A Magazine Curated By. This year, the biannual fashion title has reached a rare milestone for independent publishing, let alone fashion publishing. It's celebrating its 25th year anniversary. The reason behind its success and its community of readers who religiously collect every issue of the magazine? It's one-of-a-kind concept. As the name suggests, each issue is curated by a different fashion designer or creative, giving readers a rare, intimate view into the world of that particular artist, the books they enjoy, the type of photography they're passionate about, the items of clothing that have shaped their aesthetic sensibilities. During a time of fast content and surface-level communication, the publication's approach is no doubt a breath of fresh air for anyone who appreciates the worlds of fashion and print and wants to delve deeper. Originally conceived as Belgium's first fashion magazine, over the years, A Magazine has gained international recognition, with guest curators including Martin Margiela, Tom Brown, Rodarte, Yohji Yamamoto, Alessandro Michele. I could go on. As that list of names suggests, the magazine's one constant is its variation. No two issues are ever the same, with each edition reimagining everything down to the typeface. I spoke to Blake, who has been editor-in-chief since 2023, about the process of working with designers to curate their issues, encouraging them to follow their instincts in new directions and experiment outside their usual creative mediums. We also discuss Blake's almost accidental path into the fashion industry, his appreciation for print as a physical medium, and his ambition to expand the magazine's vision further to reflect more people and places. Let's hear directly from Blake Abbie.
So, A Magazine Curated By is a project that was started by Walter van Beirendonck in 2000 as a part of the Land Festival, which was a fashion and cultural festival that took over the city of Antwerp in 2001. So the starting of it was developing it in 2000. And that included like exhibitions by Comme des Garçons, Chanel, film screenings. And one of the projects within that festival was Number A Magazine. So this was the project that was initiated by Walter and was the beginning of A Magazine Curated By. What Walter offered was a publication to his partner, actually, Dirk Franzen, to really create a fashion magazine. Belgium at that time didn't have any real fashion magazines. And so ultimately what Dirk wanted to do was make a publication that was a celebration of Antwerp, hence Number A for Antwerp, which continues to be on our covers. And he worked with like incredible creatives. The Antwerp Six was very much involved in that first issue. Creatives like Inge Gronyard, who is quite present throughout our history. And they just, did a beautiful fashion publication. And after that, we continued making magazines Number B with Bernhard Wilhelm, Number C with Schleien, Number D with Olivier Teskens, Number E with Victor Rolf. And then in 2004, we rebranded as A Magazine Curated By with our magazine with Martin Margiela. So Maison Martin Margiela was our first issue in our new name, we'll say. But the magazine is each time curated with a fashion designer. So ultimately what we do and we offer to them is a space for them to explore the creative worlds, their inspirations, their community, their family, their kind of idols in a way that is not connected to their commercial projects. Sometimes when I talk to the designers when we start the project, I say, hey, what kind of things would you like to do that you would never be able to do in your brands? Because this is a magazine that is really focused on the person themselves rather than the brands. Even though sometimes it's named after the brands, it's really after like the designers. We're really trying to separate kind of the designer's creative world from the market, the commercial market. We don't sell anything in the magazine. We don't have real credits. We just sell creativity. And I'm the editor-in-chief now. And I've been a part of the magazine for 12 years, actually as editor-at-large prior, and for the last 2 years taking over as editor-in-chief. And yeah, it's a great year to celebrate the 25 years of incredible designers. We have, as I said, Yoji Yamamoto, Jun Takahashi, Haider Ackerman, and more recently Peter Do and Glenn Martins and Sakai, Chitose Abbie of Sakai, Kim Jones, Simone Rocha. It's a real gamut of 32 designers or designer duos. And yeah, we spend 3 months, 6 months to 3 years creating a magazine with these folks, and it's a really incredible, intimate project that I'm very proud to work on.
Yeah, it's what an incredible roster of designers. And also when you're speaking about getting these designers who usually work on collections every 6 months, sometimes every 3 months, to experiment with new mediums, to pay homage to their idols. I think that there is a conversation that we've been having a lot as well about the crossovers between different sectors. Designers sometimes want to work with architects, they want to go into interiors, sometimes they partner with chefs. And sometimes it can feel like a marketing exercise, but when it's done in a genuine way, I think it's an opportunity for creatives from all different worlds to get outside their comfort zones and to experiment, like you were saying, with creativity in a purer form. Is that something that you find is the reason why everyone is so compelled to work on something like a magazine curated by?
For sure. I mean, we don't really have creative constraints in the magazine, which in a brand, associated brand, there are certain constraints that you work with. Of course, we deal with budgets. That is something that is reality of making a publication. But what we offer is people to experiment, as you say, and try new things and try things that they may not have ever tried. Oftentimes we're working on a next issue actually, and there's a model who's going to be involved, and they might be interested in writing something. We often perceive them to just be a figurehead for something, but they have other kind of creative pursuits, and so we try and offer those kinds of different avenues for people.
Yes, it's getting outside of your routine and your day job, which is incredible.
Unexpected things, I mean, we're more than what our titles are, right?
And I think you've been doing that a lot. You're a true multi-hyphenate. You work across lots of different industries and sectors, and
Yeah.
then have taken on the role of editor-in-chief at A Mag. Tell me a little bit about your background and all the different things that you're doing, and why you decided to take on the editor-in-chief role as well on top of everything else.
Yeah,
What was the appeal?
I have a very funny background. I studied music. I studied singing, classical singing in university, and ended up coming to Paris to study with a teacher here. And the only reason I ended up fashion is because I needed an internship. I needed a job when I wasn't studying and when I wasn't singing in the churches where I was getting paid.
Interesting. So it wasn't the big passion that you wanted to do
I
from day one.
I mean, I'm Canadian, and so
Yes.
strangely, I think a lot of Canadians who grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s, we were very fortunate to, on TV, have two incredible television shows, Fashion File with Tim Blanks and Fashion Television with Jeannie Becker. And so those television shows really established for me fashion as like a creative community, as a creative space. And my mom would always watch it. She'd be making dinner and I would be doing my homework and it would kind of be on in the background. And I was always fascinated by the industry, and I was fascinated in the idea of like expression. And having studied music was really, I guess, in the 19th century, which is really what my focus was. It was the kind of center of a lot of creative connections. Musicians and singers, especially, were working with poets, or working with sonographers, were working with dancers. It really became kind of this like nucleus. And in some capacity, I feel like fashion has taken that charge in our contemporary world, where fashion connects with everything. And so my approach to singing was always kind of more of a sociological interest. And so it's not so much of a shift. And so in any case, yeah, I was here in Paris, and I was studying and opened a magazine and took some tear sheets out, and I followed them on, I guess, Instagram or Facebook, whatever it was at that time. And I saw that they were hiring an assistant in London, and I said, you know what, I'm going to London this weekend to see a friend for her birthday, and might as well send in my CV, and went and got off the train and went to have an interview, and they offered me the job. And that was where I started at an industry magazine. So I was the editorial assistant for just a very short time. And after that period of time, I met my bosses at System Magazine at Industry, and we left and started this incredible publication called System Magazine, which still is a publication that deals with kind of fashion as cultural space. And we were working with incredible designers at that time, and to be a managing editor of an incredibly important and impactful publication in my early 20s was very much set me on a different path. And I was singing at the same time, but kind of let that go a little bit. But in that moment, I met Dan Thawley, my predecessor here at A Magazine, as some of the younger editors and people really at the fashion shows, and we became friends. And I started consulting on the publication and stealthily started doing both publications, both System and A Magazine, different markets, different markets. So I didn't think there was a bit of a conflict. And then, yeah, slowly took over and became editor at large. And just, 2 years ago, as I said, I took over the editorship.
Yeah, and when you go through the different magazines, the different projects that you've been working on, it's all really special, more niche titles, right?
Sure.
Independent. So the age-old question that we've all been discussing, what is the value in your perspective when it comes to print? A lot of people all across the industry want to kind of declare the end of print. I mean, at Monocle, more than anywhere else, I think we're such passionate believers in it as well. But what is your perspective about the changes and shifts in the industries from what you're seeing, the conversations that you are having?
Well, for A Magazine in particular, each issue is completely redesigned. So we changed the typography, the graphic approach, the paper itself. So you can't necessarily get that same feeling or sensitivity when you're working with just a digital medium. And I think what's really important about making a print publication is that we have a relationship to objects. As humans, we surround ourselves by beautiful things, and a magazine can be a beautiful thing. I do think, in particular with print, as editors, as journalists, we're very specific with how we start a publication, what the narrative is through the publication, and how we end the magazine, you know? And you can't necessarily get that on a digital platform. I mean, I think people are doing it really well with like Monocle. A Magazine, we're still figuring that out. But to be able to have something physical and not ephemeral, I think social media, don't get me wrong, I love TikTok. I'm on TikTok all the time, but the infinite scroll kind of it's a very different sensibility. With a publication, it's nice to be able to take up space and also to be very specific and document something in a specific period of time. Whereas on digital, you kind of lose this temporality, which I think is important.
And I think as long as something is beautifully made, and like you said, it's an object that documents at the moment in time, there is still the appetite from at least a certain audience to invest in
For
print and to
sure.
collect these objects, right?
Yeah, I mean, with A Magazine, I mean, people have the magazines from 25 years ago, and I always tell them to insure them. They're very rare now, but it's really interesting to see the whole collection, to see the changes, as I said, in paper and the changes in texture and just feeling. Each one is so different when you look and smell, actually, really even. So, yeah, I think that we like beautiful things. Humans love beautiful things. Why wouldn't we want to create magazines and hold on to them?
Yeah, I think it's a lot simpler, the answer
Yeah.
to kind of this question about the future of print than we often make it sound. But absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
I just think, sorry, I just say something.
Of
I
course.
just think that like all like technology and social media and digital, they're just tools to be able to amplify things, and we can shift the balance and make a magazine a bit less or make a magazine a bit more. I don't know, like it's not about getting rid of print. It's just shifting our relationship to between the digital and the physical.
I'm also really curious, as an editor myself, about your creative process in making this beautiful object that we are speaking about. Before we speak about the designers that you bring on board for every issue, tell me about your own creative process when you're working with your team. You said you sort of start from scratch every issue, you're redesigning it. What is the starting point? How do you draw inspiration?
For sure. Well, we're a bit different because as much as we are an editorial team, we also have an outside editor. So we're always bringing another voice into the world. And so we, of course, are thinking about what we want to talk about in the issue. But ultimately, we're waiting and we kind of serve the voice of this guest curator that's coming on board. And so what I always say in our first conversations with these designers is I ask them, who are your idols? What are your dreams? What are you thinking about? And ultimately, through lots of conversations, lots of text messages, lots of kind of like random images that they're sending me, we start to develop an idea of like their sensibility and their idea and thought process. Different designers want to approach it differently. You know, some people want to come to the publications with a very specific rubric. So we look at Kim Jones's issue. He really wanted to look at the alphabet. He's a collector. He wanted to use A to Z as this way to organize his thoughts. And so with that, we were like, okay, well, A for Africa. You know, it could be as simple as that. And who can define Africa? Well, he has a great relationship with Naomi Campbell. So how do we include Naomi Campbell? She has a great relationship. She's developing a relationship with the continent, and so we go from there. And that went all the way to Z. But then sometimes it's a bit very different with, you know, someone like Peter Doe, who did 2 issues ago. It was my first issue as editor in chief. Peter is a young Vietnamese American immigrant, you know, and it was really important for me to find a way to understand who Peter is. Peter is very press shy. He doesn't show his face. He wears a mask when he does interviews and rarely talks. And so I think for me, as someone who knows Peter personally in New York, it was important to find a way to share with the readers a vision of who Peter is without showing him. So that the ideas for that came through the idea of like how do we build a figure without a representation of them. So it's through memory, it's through this idea of scent. What does he love to smell? What does he love to taste? So we're building out his world of his five senses essentially, and hopefully through that you can kind of like create a frame of a person, if that makes sense.
So intriguing. And I mean, from what you're saying, it sounds like as an editor, you almost take a little bit of a backseat of your own personal vision, and you focus on getting out information from these creative figures and also empowering them to be able to tell their stories and their vision, which is a very interesting approach. And to me, it sounds like it requires less ego than a
Very
traditional editor would need, which is it's actually a conversation I've been having with a lot of designers as well, that they want to put their ego on the side and focus on actually what the customer needs, and that's what a modern designer needs to do. Do you agree with that? Do you find that this is the approach that you need to have to be a good editor and to have a successful collaboration with a designer that you bring on board?
Yeah, I mean, ego is very much involved, let's say. Some designers are very, very particular with what they want and with what they don't want, which actually makes my role and much
Yeah.
easier. I view my role as I need to push our designers that we work with. I need to push them outside of their comfort zone. I need to push them to do things that they would never have been able to do before, to look at people who are out of their world, to see that how we can bring people from A Magazine's or my world or my team's world into their world. And that is really kind of like the dance we play. The ego is very much involved though. But it's rightly so. These publications are called A Magazine Curated By
Yeah.
someone's name. And so I'm very aware that the publication we're putting out is a representation of them. And ultimately, we want them to be happy and when we want them to be very proud of the work that they do. So it really is this back and forth and back and forth. And that's why sometimes it takes up to 3 years to create a publication. Some of the conversations like Grace Wells Bonner actually, yes, we had a little bit of COVID in the mix, but we had a conversation after Freeze London once. We went for breakfast and I proposed to Grace the project and she needed time. She needed time to marinate and think, and it took us 3 years to get her publication onto shelves. Some people are a bit faster. Glenn Martin's that we took 5 months to do and it was very kind of like quick in and out, and each issue has a different kind of like feeling and a gesture. I think ultimately I want that to feel contemporary. I don't want the magazine to feel a book. For me, it is a magazine. It is in our title, and I think there is this timeliness, and that is kind of essential to creating a publication.
Absolutely, but it's also a true marker of luxury, that you
Yes.
can take your time and
Yes.
marinate ideas and explore them with a designer.
For sure. I mean, I really do think that it's the most. I mean, I've worked on a bunch of different publications now. It's really the most precious publication I think that exists in the fashion world. I mean, to be able to spend the amount of time that we do with the designers, to be able to be on text with them, to really kind of like involve myself into their brains is really, I don't want to say become them, but really become a mirror to them, actually. I think it's really interesting.
And tell me, how do you pick the
Yes.
designers or the creatives that you invite on board? Because it is 2 issues a year. You have a lot of people to, yeah, and so many different possibilities. So, how do you boil it down to the people that you want to approach and then make the magazines with?
Well, we have a long list of people we would love to work with. But ultimately, I mean, we're very concerned. We've always been very concerned about the progression, who comes before and after the order of the people that come in and do the publication. But it comes from gut. We don't want to be always doing like the same thing. We don't always want to be doing the hottest person, because then it becomes a bit too kind of marketed or too aligned with the trend of the market, shall we say, the fashion industry. And so, once we'll do Alessandro Michele when he was he just started at Gucci. And then the next one we did was Ekas Lara, which was an incredibly opposite world to what Alessandro Michele does. And we kind of try and keep our readers and the industry kind of on their toes. Ultimately, though, a lot of our decisions are maybe because of the availability of the designers we're working with. Glenn Martins was working when we did his issue last year, was working between Diesel and Y Projects at the time, flying between Italy and Paris. And prior to that moment in time, he didn't necessarily have the right time or enough time to be able to kind of to dedicate to the project, because it does take time and work. It really is a sense of gut, and that's, I guess, where the editor comes involved. The real kind of ego of editor is, and that choice takes time. But ultimately, yeah, we're right now we're trying to figure out and plan for the next 2 years. Or 2-3 years.
Is that how far ahead you?
Yeah, we have to now, because designers are, they have so little time, and I think because the magazine is becoming more and more public, and it becomes more and more a bigger project, I guess, for the designers to take on, because we have such a legacy, because we have incredible names in the in the 25 years. They want to make sure that it's the best thing ever, and I always tell them, look, this is a fun project. It doesn't need to be, it's not a monograph. It's not your final days. You can just have fun with it. But again, ultimately their name is on the magazine, so they want it to be as perfect as possible. So
yeah, and like you say, it has become a lot more public, but I can imagine that your audience doesn't need hype still. Like, even if you are approaching a more up and coming or niche name or an Alessandro Michele, the appetite is still there either way.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think we have to also remind ourselves now, 25 years ago, I mean, Martin was just leaving his brand, but was not necessarily the household name he was, or he is now at this stage. Yohji Yamamoto, again, had been doing things in the industry for like 20 years already at that stage, but was maybe not a household figure. Haider Ackermann was a young designer and had never really done anything. And so I think it was maybe his third season making clothing. And we look back on it now, and those names are very hyped. Haider just debuted it with Tom Ford this week, and so yeah, our readership I believe they trust us. I mean, Alessandro, when we did an issue with him, he just debuted at Gucci. No one knew who he was, but it was important for us because we could recognize that he already had a very clear vision on his world, and so we were able to really extract and build a world with him. That's what we hope to continue doing.
And again, that's where you come in, and you have to take a risk and a chance on some people.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it is important. I mean, I think for any magazine, but especially for something so precious as you were mentioning earlier, to bring the pages to life, right? And to bring people together and in person as well. Do you find that that's a big part of what you want, what you do when you're thinking about the magazine? Outside the object, kind of bringing people together as well in real life.
I mean, community is the core of everything, that what we do. Every issue we work on is about the friends and family that are around the designer. And so what I wanted to do with this 25 years is to really reestablish A Magazine as this like cultural entity and cultural community, and bring people together into the exhibition space, and kind of remind people of the connections between each designer's world. I mean, everyone is a creative, and everyone has similar references and similar upbringings, but the product and the production of it and the outcome is very different. And if you see in the exhibition, there are no credits that are on display. You can scan a QR code and you can read the credits, you can learn about the objects, but the intent was to just place objects beside each other and to see how they relate to one another, see how, There, I mean, yeah, you can just see the relationships in different ways. There's a Bambi, there's a doll of a small Bambi in the exhibition, and everyone was thinking that was Alessandra Michele's contribution, but actually that was Martine Sitbon's. And so the idea that like it can be multiple people's was like quite interesting to me.
How interesting. And having gotten everyone in the room, I think it's such different types of people and creatives over the years. But do you find that there is a common thread or certain common values that people have in order to be invited to curate the magazine?
I mean, for me, it's about working with designers who have a clear creative world. It doesn't need to be that they're very much like, established in their career, but they're very precise and authentic to what they believe in. That's really what's important to me. Sometimes they can be, yes, downtown New York brand like Ekaslada, but when we did the magazine with them, they were very connected within the art space in New York, and you could see already them making waves through that community. And then we have someone like Lucy and Luke Meyer, Jill Sander, who are actually quite quiet people, but they had a very clear vision as to how they wanted to approach their work. And it was very interesting for me with working with them because Lucy has a very kind of formal training within the fashion world, and then Luke comes from more of a streetwear background, and so understanding kind of the blend of those, especially at that time when we made that magazine, that culturally within the fashion world, those kinds of conversations were happening organically. But the fact that they were together, married, and trying to approach something new between the two of them was very interesting. Yeah, it's about just being clear and concise with what they want to put out in the world. That's
And
all.
honest.
And honest.
Yes, right.
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes they're too honest, these designers. Yeah.
And tell me, the next chapter, the next 25 years, will we see anything evolve and change in the magazine? Do you want to keep the concept very true to what it has been? What's next? I won't ask you who's the next curator,
No,
as
not
much as
yet.
I would love
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, so for me, it's about remaining true and pure to the form. Walter van Beirendonck, an incredible designer, started this. And for me, I'm not a designer. I do not come from a fashion background, as I said. But it's important to respect Walter's world and Walter's choices about it being a magazine from designers for designers. It's about a magazine from designers for the creative world. And so while we expand out from kind of a more Eurocentric vision, I think it's important to kind of maintain the designer as a focus, just because no one's doing that. It is very special. And so, but yeah, the magazine started in Antwerp, was very much about the friends of the friends and the friends. And as we move forward, we have to recognize there are different ways of looking at what fashion is. And also for me, fashion does not necessarily need to be luxury. Fashion it's clothing that relates to the body, or jewelry or makeup, but it's really about the relation of the body to an object, the relation of the body to clothing, or to, yes, as I said, jewelry or makeup. That's how we kind of envision the next 25, 30, 50 years. There's always going to be designers, so we kind of have a endless font of people to tap into.
That was Blake Abbie, editor-in-chief of A Magazine Curated By. And that's all for today's show. Make sure you subscribe and stay tuned. We have more big interviews coming next week. Today's episode was produced and edited by Lily Austin. I'm Natalie Theodosi. Thank you so much for listening.